Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is the next installment from the incredible mind of Dogs34567. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR? And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled I'm a Cryptid Hunter, and my last assignment was Skinwalker Ranch. Let's get straight into that. Hello, it's me again, Hector, and since my last few stories have gotten really popular, I decided to tell you all about my most recent mission to Skinwalker Ranch. I'm sure you've all heard about the weird happenings that have been going on around this specific area of Utah. From skinwalkers to aliens to even the sightings of the extinct dire wolf. This place is shrouded in mystery and unexplainable events, and I've been contracted to go on an investigation to see what has been happening ever since this place has disappeared from the eye of the public. I was given this job by the government, who got in contact with my superiors, who told them to send the best cryptid hunter they have, and so they sent me. I took it as a compliment. I haven't been out ever since my failed search in the Nahanni Valley for my friend Sal. I took this as a chance to bounce back and get back into serious cryptid hunting. While on a break, I acquired some new skills and even sharpened the old ones. I also forged new weapons and started using more plants in my poisons and toxins and tonics. I decided I would head out for 4 days after I was given the mission. I had a feeling I would need to bring something new I had made, and so I decided to craft it and more things useful for me, and then I departed. The trip didn't take long, and it was a nice ride through the countryside. I parked my jeep 3 miles down from the entrance and embarked on foot. Immediately after I went through the entrance, the air shifted. It was like entering an era that was supposed to have ended long ago, during the Earth's first stages of its development. I took out my crossbow and immediately took a defensive posture. Something from the foliage with amber eyes was watching me. This thing's eyes were 6 feet above the ground. We locked eyes and they disappeared as soon as I blinked. That made me switch from silver-tipped arrows to wolfsbane arrows immediately. I moved on soon after, as staying in one spot would be bad news for me. A few miles down from the entrance was when I started my investigation. I saw something truly disturbing. It was a dead cow. I knelt down to inspect the injuries. They were horrible. Eyes were gouged out, tongue removed. His entrails had been removed and partially eaten. The most disturbing was, this was a fresh kill. That was when I heard a twig crack behind me. I stood up immediately and came face to face with a Wendigo. This thing had a deer skull with majestic sharp horns inscribed with ancient markings and claws so sharp and strong that they could cut through steel beams with no issue. It stood about 7 feet tall and was covered in dark fur, with piercing blue eyes that stared into my soul. "Take a picture, you ugly bastard. It'll last longer," I said. I don't think it liked that, because it then picked me up with one hand and threw me into the wall of the abandoned barn. I got up instantly because of the adrenaline and charged after the ugly bastard with a silver tomahawk coated in wolfsbane. He swung with his left hand. I dodged and uppercutted him in the head with an upward slash. The hit stunned him and knocked one of his horns off. It stumbled back and let out a roar and started charging at me with its head down on one horn. I maneuvered past it and shot the bastard in the base of its skull with a wolfsbane arrow, and it fell defeated. I walked up to it and finished it off with a well-placed crossbow bolt to the head, and that was the end of that fight. I cut off the other horn and kept both as souvenirs, as they could prove useful later. Now the adrenaline wore off and I felt every blow that it had dealt to me. I looked around for a place to spend time to heal and recover my stamina, when my eyes fell upon a mini house. I approached it and was thrown off at how well and taken care of it looked. I walked in and noticed on the walls there was a strange art. It looked to be of ancient Indian culture. I found the bed and decided to take a nap. Later I woke to my bed surrounded by small little people, and some were looking at me in awe, others were toying with my weapons, and I immediately stood up and apologized for the intrusion. I walked out and they gave me my weapons and even gave me some food and water. I was weary of taking stuff from them, but they seemed nice and I waved goodbye and they did the same, and I carried on with the expedition. I came upon a stream and kneeled down at the bank of it and took a hand of water and drank it. It was the freshest water I'd ever tasted in my life. And the second was the one the little people gave me. And the stream was very clean and looked to be free of any debris. I stood up and noticed large footprints 400 feet from where I took a scoop of water. I examined them and they were massive. I put my hand in comparison. They could dwarf my hand 4 times over. I scanned my brain for every cryptid I knew, and nothing came to mind of what this monster could be. This was starting to be a long night, so I set up camp 5 miles down the stream and into the forest by the ranch and slept in the tent. Later, I was awoken by the urge to go to the bathroom. I stepped out of my tent with my tomahawk in hand. I started bleeding the lizard, and after I was done I turned around and headed back to my tent to go back to sleep, and keeping a mental note in mind that the thing with the amber eyes that had just got done watching me was getting closer. The next day I headed down to the stream and started cleaning myself up, and the Wendigo did more damage than I thought, and so I had a couple new scars to clean, or they would get infected. After I was done I noticed that the tomahawk was missing. I looked around and saw the culprit. It looked to be a juvenile direwolf, if I could call this thing juvenile. It was huge and black with grey eyes. We locked eyes and it booked it, and I took after it. After around 2 miles it stopped and rolled on its back and dropped my tomahawk. It just wanted to play. I gave its belly a rub and got it a stick instead of a tomahawk and played with it for a good bit. We wrestled, played hide and seek, and even went hunting together, where we eventually bagged a giant deer. After about 2 more hours of being together, we heard a monster of a howl. He looked at me and it took off into the forest. I wanted to chase after him, but I knew I wouldn't be able to take care of a direwolf like he was, a pet. And so I let him go and continued the investigation. Later in the night, I saw moving stars and I thought they were beautiful, until they got closer, and that was when I took cover. I saw a spaceship hover over a field and dropped off some creatures that looked like goblins, except these things had yellow eyes that glowed in the dark. Cautiously, I observed them, and they didn't do much, just look at the plants and some of the animals that were still on the ranch. It honestly looked like they were there just being curious beings who just wanted to see what kind of life this foreign planet hosted. After they were done, they left and drove away in their ship. I sat and thought and stood a bit dumbfounded at what I had just witnessed, but that was broken by the sound of trees crashing on the edge of the forest. It was then an absolute monster of a creature came out of the woods. It had the body of an elephant, but the tusks were odd to say the least. They were elongated and would make any ivory hunter rich beyond his wild beliefs. It stood about 10 feet tall and looked like it could easily trample any building in its way. I took a drink of water with its majestic trunk and went on its way eventually. I'm glad this thing wasn't a bull, and didn't feel like I was trespassing on its territory, because that definitely would have been a fight I would have had to run from. Eventually I went to my camp and went to lay down and get some shut-eye, but that I was quickly interrupted by a huge paw slashing through my tent. It barely missed me, and I scrambled to get to my feet and weapon in hand. What I saw instantly made me unsheath my machete. I knew I had to take this thing serious, or I would be dead. What stood before me was an absolute unit of a Wahila. This thing, it was gigantic, about 6 feet on all fours and had to be about 8 feet on just 2. It had razor-sharp claws, amber eyes, and a scar on its face. This thing had been through years of fighting. This Wahila was ancient, had to be an alpha. I had made the first move and bit me hard on the shoulder, and with such quickness I hardly had time to react. I then slashed at it with my machete. It didn't do anything. Shit, I thought. It then slung me through 5 trees and I landed hard on the bank of the river. I decided to take out what I had been preparing before I went on this expedition. I took out my blunderbuss, loaded it with wolfsbane and foxglove rounds. I lined up a shot on the bastard, but before I could pull the trigger, I was stopped with something tugging on the tassels of my coat. It was the juvenile direwolf I was playing with earlier. I had whimpered and I lowered my gun, and then I started to realize my situation. This Wahila, it wasn't hunting me as a source of food or game. It was just protecting its territory and what it held most dear to it. I looked to where my camp had been. I was close to the den, and just at the entrance were 10 little Wahila pups, and they were watching me. I've heard stories of Wahila lurking around on a ranch, but I didn't know it was still alive and that I would run into the same one. This thing must have took me as a threat as soon as it saw my arsenal. It must have thought I was here to hunt it. I lowered my blunderbuss and I think the Wahila figured that I wasn't a threat to it. It then walked up to me and rubbed up against me. I took it as a way of saying sorry, I almost killed you. I pat it on the head and let it lead me to its den. I sat against the rock wall while the Wahila pups looked at me. One even approached me and fell asleep on my lap. The Wahila returned later with some herbs and aloe and dropped them at my feet to help me tend to my wounds. It sure did a thing for me. The only thing that stayed was the soreness. Eventually I fell asleep in the den, surrounded by Wahila pups and with the big one sleeping at my side. I stood up trying not to wake them and left that morning. I reported to my superiors and reported what I had seen at the ranch, leaving out the part about me bonding with the Wahilas. I told them to make this a protected area. I did it for the sake of the Wahilas and the little people. I wouldn't want anything bad to happen to them. They took my statement and they said, Roger, we'll get in touch with the government and make this place off limits to the public immediately. And nice work. I still visit that place to occasionally visit the Wahilas, and they've gotten big and started hunting prey on their own. I know there won't be any trouble to the public because Skinwalker Ranch is huge and could easily support them. Wahilas don't really tend to hunt humans unless you provoke them, and that's never a good idea. Well, that ends it for my story. If you guys want to hear more, I have a hunt coming up in the Himalayan mountains. If you guys want to hear how that goes, let me know. Until then, goodbye. I took an expedition to the wilderness of the Himalayas, and there's something I need to talk about. Let's get straight into that. Hi, my name is Hector. I've been hunting cryptids for a good number of years, except I'm not your average hunter. Like the military, our corporation has its special teams which I will not disclose the name of. Just know it's a 4-letter agency that outranks the FBI and CIA, who we work with frequently. When something big comes up that normal hunters can't handle either, a group of us or just one of us are usually called in to take care of it. And the most recent reason why all of my team has been deployed to unify and take care of a cryptid was because deep in the forests of Africa, we'd heard rumours of a grunt slang wandering about. It turned out to just be rumours, but if you want to hear about that story, let me know. It was pretty wild. Not all of us made it out, and that's usually the case when we encounter something as ancient and as powerful as this beast. I got the call at 0600 on a Friday that there was some suspicious activity going on around the region of Nepal, strange cases of people disappearing in the night or never coming back when they go out for a trip to the mountains. And so naturally, they called me. I was the leader of my division, and so I knew something truly messed up must be happening. I took the job, and at 0900 hours, I was on a plane to Nepal. After I got off the plane, I took a 3-hour trip to a remote village at the base of the Himalayas. It was a very beautiful place, this place, had been untouched by man, and was off the map completely. This place had beautiful fields with grass that was so lush and green, and beyond that, the eye could see it had rivers crystal clear that emanated a beautiful colour of blue, and the stream with the cleanest water I'd ever seen. This village had a beautiful lush forest 4 miles away from it, with trees that could dwarf the Eiffel Tower 2 times over. This place was like something straight out of a storybook, and I was in complete awe. If this place was on the map, it would be a hot tourist spot and would probably get ruined by people who don't really care for nature. I could see one of the reasons why it was off the map. After my tour around the area, I met the village chief, and he was a tall man, about 6'6" at least, and fit as a fiddle. We talked, and he offered me a substance similar to what is commonly known as cannabis. I accepted his offer, and we talked and smoked about what was going on, and I'm not going to lie, this stuff would make cannabis look like tobacco. He talked of strange things happening to his villagers, like being abducted in the dead of the night, and some not returning when they went to the mountains. He also told me he heard strange noises coming from deep within the forest on nights of the full moon. Well, we started talking about North American Indian culture, and when he saw my dreamcatcher necklace, we then discussed our tribes, different cultures and customs. It was very eye-opening. After I left his tent, I decided I was to investigate the forest first. I woke up around 0400 and packed my hunting gear for a potential dangerous encounter. Without even going 2 miles deep into the forest, I encountered footprints, and they were humanoid, but not quite. They had the shape and the toes of a human foot, but the toes, well, they were extended, and I could tell they had claws at the end. But the most interesting part was that it had what looked like a thumb at the edge of its foot. I knew this would be a difficult hunt. The beast had marked its territory with deep claw marks in the trees. I made my place high in the tree and soaked my silver-tip arrows in wolfsbane and sharpened my blessed tomahawk to its sharpest, and then waited until sundown. When sundown came, the aura of the forest changed. I was malevolent and very sinister in feeling, and that was when I quickly ducked and slid down the tree. The beast had known I was here. I readied my tomahawk and turned around to face the beast, who had just missed me by an inch with its blood-red claws. Oh my god, it was a Laki. Oh shit, I thought. Lakis are said to be demons who used to live in the forests and later became protectors to the town's people. But instead of being a protector, this thing had gone rogue and started preying on the villagers and using them as a main food source. I had a ferocious face, protruding fangs, and looked to be a man with long black hair extending past its shoulders. It was tall and had gigantic hands that ended with long, red sharp claws. Without hesitation, it picked me up and threw me through 3 trees. I left a nasty scar on my chest. I took out the branch that was impaling me and did the best I could to stop the bleeding to the best of my ability. I was back in the fight and it was quickly approaching me, so I took out my bow and shot the bastard 3 times, 2 in the chest and 1 in the shoulder. That slowed it down significantly. I was able to cut off its arm and slam it to the ground. It let out a final roar, but I cut off its head and ended its life. With demons as powerful and as ancient as this one, I didn't take any chances, and so I took out its heart, burned it, and purified its territory. and just for extra measure, I patrolled the forest and took down any totems it may have made, and so it wouldn't come back. I had found what had been taking people in the night, and so one job down, one more to go. I returned to the chief and told him what I had encountered, and assured him that they won't be coming back anymore. He thanked me with tears in his eyes and gave me something that might help me with my hunt in the mountains. He gave me a crossbow, and it was a fine weapon. The wood was made from oak wood and had a steel crafted from Damascus, the real ancient type. The crossbow had to be at least 100 years old. This was a very beautiful gift, and I'd make full use of it on my voyage tomorrow. After that encounter, I read up on some of the stuff that might be lurking in the mountains of this region, and I kinda dreaded encountering any of these creatures. Snow lions or yeti, I know my trip to the Himalayas will be tough. The next day I started my trek to the mountain, which was around 29.4 kilometers. It was dark by the time I got there, so I started a fire and prepared some lamb and started eating. Around 0300, I got the feeling that I was being watched. I got to my feet, tomahawk in hand, and out of the white snow emerged a kia. It was a fat, short, ape-like creature who meant no harm, telling me from its body language. I asked it respectively why it was here, and I invited it to take a seat with me at the fire across from me. It took me by surprise when it spoke and told me a story of the garampa. The local residents decided that it was not safe to keep the garampa in village, so they promised to provide him an annual feast of boiled rice and buffalo meat if he agreed to move to the mountains, and so the giant was persuaded to move out. But over time the giant got more greedy and became twisted and evil and started to snatch people and even children from the village. I paid attention to the story. I needed everything. I needed to face one of these creatures, and so a little information wouldn't hurt. After the story, I had a great understanding of the beast, and I thanked the kia, and it disappeared without a trace back into the ivy wilderness. I then decided that the hunt for this giant would come tomorrow night, and so the rest of tomorrow would be equipment preparation. Night came and I came upon some tracks 5 miles from where I'd made camp, and they were huge, easily dwarfing my own, and I was about 6'5" and 250 pounds. This thing could have easily been over 10 feet tall, and telling by the indent it left in the snow, I estimated it weighed around 900 pounds. The tracks led to the opening of a cave, and I slowly approached it, tomahawk in my left hand and crossbow the chief had given me in my right. I walked into the cave and was met by a terrible stench of death and decay. My human bones were scattered across the cave floor, and sadly, half-eaten human bodies were strung up from the top. The floor was covered in a dark, dry blood. I had to hold back the rage that I was filled with, because I know the best hunter is a calm hunter. A few more steps into the cave and I heard what sounded like snoring, and that was when I saw him. He was gigantic, about 15 feet tall with long red hair. It had fangs protruding from its mouth and hands as big as a fishing net, long fingers that ended with sharp claws. It was dirty, covered in blood, and laying on the bones of the past children and adults it had killed in the past. I slowly took out the crossbow and loaded it with the crossbow bolt that had a triple dose of wolfsbane and a silver tip. I shot him in the right shoulder. He woke up angry, rushed towards me. I avoided his hands and shot him again, hitting him right in the liver, a fatal shot. He still had fight in him though. He picked me up and threw me through 5 stalagmites and outside of the cave. Damn it, I'm tired of getting thrown through shit, I grunted as I got up. I knew my crossbow wasn't cutting it, so I took out my favourite weapon. I unloaded my blunderbuss and loaded it with silver pellets, and since the bastard likes to kill children, I also loaded up my Pfeiffer Zeliska 600 Nitro Express revolver. I haven't had to dual wield these bad boys in a while. Well, he came charging at me and swung at me. I jumped over it, flipping onto his back, and unloaded 6 shots into the top of his back. As he was falling back, I jumped off, and while in the air, unloaded a perfect blunderbuss shot to his face, severely wounding him. I walked up to him, and he was still breathing. I pointed my blunderbuss at him and shot the final shot into his skull, effectively ending its life. I cut off its head and brought it back to the village chief, who was scared to realize that this giant had been terrorizing his village all this time. He thanked me and gave me an offer of making me a member of the tribe. I considered it, but due to my line of work, I had to turn it down. He understood and said I was welcome back any time, and said if they ever needed a hunter, that I'd be the first one to ask for. And so I returned to the States and my house in Tennessee, and with a big paycheck and a few cool scars and an experience, that was one of the many highlights of my career. Well, that's my story. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'm constantly on mission, so I really get time to write my experiences. If you guys would like to hear more, just let me know. I'll be happy to share with you. There have been times when a hunt hasn't gone my way, but that's a story for another time. Be safe and have a nice day, guys. Hector, out. Wow, 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 wow. And another one. Wow. Intense cryptid hunting story there from the wonderful mind of Dogs34567. As ever, a huge thank you to the author for allowing me to narrate their work. I really look forward to more of your stories in the future. Well, guys and girls, you know the drill. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and that community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid Crew. Of course, if you have a story to share with us here on the show, whether it's a true or fictional piece, please do get it over to the usual email, which is dmtforestofear@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you. As always, guys, I hope you're all well and happy, keeping fit and focused, and above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.